their witnesses. Well, that didn't sit well with my dad. He spent some time in physical recovery after getting out of the hospital, and then moved to a new apartment with a friend as a roommate, and together they plotted his revenge on Ted. My dad told me that back then, if police failed you, then you took payback into your own hands. Now, a thing of note is that my grandfather on my dad's side worked at the city dump, and he was always bringing things home to collect, donate, fix, resell, etc. My dad helped him with this a lot, so he learned a lot about fixing and making things, and while with his father at work, he found ways of sneaking into the dump at night, and as a teenager, he would sneak in there at night with friends to find stuff they used to build a hidden fort in the woods nearby. My dad said the fort was so well made that it even had a makeshift wood stove that they made out of recycled bricks and a metal barrel to use in winter to keep the fort warm. This is important later. So over a few nights, my dad and his friends snuck into the dump just like they used to in order to look around for things they could use. Bit by bit, they found some old stinky clothes, shoes, and some old wooden baseball bats, and a few other useful things for the revenge. The dump also had an assortment of used tools the employees found in the trash and set aside to be used on site, but also regularly borrowed, so no one really kept track of them. My dad and his friend kept all of the stuff they were going to use hidden at the fort they made as teenagers near the dump, so they had a perfect place to build the tools of their revenge. Next, they made sure they had as solid of an alibi as they could make. My dad and his friend were living on the top floor in an old 3-story apartment building and were already well liked in the building for being handy and fixing things for his neighbors. The walls between apartments were kind of thin, so neighbors often heard the comings and goings of people on the same floor. They'd come out and greet my dad and his friend when they came home in the evening, and apparently the building had no fire escape, so the doors were typically the only way in or out, and the main door of the building was generally locked at night with a clerk sitting watching the entire time. They came home, checked in with the clerk, said their good evenings to several neighbors, and then locked themselves in their apartment. They waited till midnight and then used a knotted rope found at the dump to climb down 3 stories from their apartment window, which coincidentally was right above the dumpsters in the side alley. They hid part of the hanging rope behind a gutter pipe and then hoofed it a few miles to the old fort where they'd hidden what Dad referred to as revenge cycles. He told me they were bicycles that they'd pieced together from junk parts found in the dump that were built and modified using the borrowed tools to have mounts for carrying the baseball bats and a few other things they couldn't fit in backpacks that they needed at the ready without making much noise or bogging them down. They rode the revenge cycles to the bungalow in an old neighborhood where Ted was living with his friends, though squatting may be a better word. Dad said it was a drug house where dealing was regularly done, which was good in a way because that meant they wouldn't call the police unless they wanted to risk exposing their operation. They scouted the area for a few nights to plan their attack, then waited for the perfect opportunity. First, my dad and his friend put on Halloween masks to cover their faces and took a tire iron that they'd brought and quietly removed the lug nuts from 2 of the wheels that were on Ted's crappy van. Then, they spray painted an insignia that was used by another gang from the area on the side of the van to make it look like this was a rival gang dispute. My dad and his friend then spied on Ted and his gang for hours from the windows, using homemade periscopes that were painted dull black so they wouldn't be seen. Ted and his cronies spent some time getting drunk and high until Ted got so wasted he went to bed. My dad and his friend waited patiently for Ted to start snoring and quietly snuck into the house through the window of the room he was sleeping in, locked the door from the inside, and bolstered it with a chair. Then, in unison, bashed both of Ted's legs multiple times right on the kneecaps with the baseball bats. And when Ted tried to cover himself, they bashed his arms too. Then they held him down and emptied a plastic bag of fresh, warm crap they'd both contributed to making all over his face before getting the heck out of there fast because he was screaming. Ted's cronies couldn't get into the room before my dad and his friend were out of there. They ducked into another yard and rode off on the revenge cycles from a different street before anyone saw them. But they heard from other people in the area that Ted's cronies tried to load him into his van to take him to the hospital. But as they got going, the wheels on one side of the van came off and they had to call an ambulance. Both of Ted's kneecaps were so badly broken that doctors said he'd never fully recover and would have to walk with a cane for years. As for Ted's cronies, a few of them got arrested, police came to the hospital to take a statement from Ted and noticed a couple of them didn't look so good. They asked them a few questions, then searched them. They ended up in the slammer for drug possession, which prompted police to search the bungalow they were living in, but some of the other guys were smart enough to move all the drugs to another location when they thought a rival gang was after them. So the cops didn't find much. Ted's remaining cronies later got cornered by my dad and his friend the next night when they followed them in their disguises on the revenge cycles to a back alley where they'd been known to regularly hang out and sell drugs. And this time they brought a pew-pew to hold them hostage with. My dad's friend held the pew-pew while my dad disarmed them all of some knives they were carrying and then beat them up with a bat. After the beatings were over, my dad and his friend claimed to be with a rival gang and told Ted's cronies that if they didn't leave town, they'd get something a lot worse than a simple beating. And for some added incentive, they sprayed one of their feet with lighter fluid and dropped a lit match onto them, causing the guy to freak out and kick his flaming shoes off. This seemed to work as all of them were gone from the city not long after that. My dad and his friend hid the revenge cycles and dropped the knotted rope from the window into the dumpster below, where they later retrieved it in the morning while taking the trash out and disposed of it. Police, of course, did eventually come to talk to my dad and his roommate, but they claimed no involvement in what happened to Ted. And neighbors and apartment clerk all told them that they never left the building after getting home on those days. My dad and his roommate then let the police come into their apartment to search the place, but they didn't find anything that could be considered evidence, as they had already disposed of the stuff they used by taking apart the revenge cycles and at night burned the baseball bats, masks, the shoes, and the clothes they wore, and the knotted rope in the fort's barrel stove, till there was nothing left but ash. As for the pew-pew, well, my dad said it was never real, but was instead a very realistic metal toy pew-pew that looked real enough in the dark to hold up someone, and they got rid of it by tossing it into the dump. The cops were satisfied in the belief my dad had nothing to do with the incident and just bid them a good day. Dad never told anyone else but me and his younger brother that he and his friends did all that. As for Ted, Dad said he never really bothered anyone again, and he ended up eventually leaving town years later because he was convinced another gang was still out to get him. What happened to him after that, Dad didn't know. I could tell he felt some measure of guilt for what he did back then, but also seemed to feel fairly justified in it as well, since Ted had badly hurt many people around town, just like what he'd done to my dad. So I suppose it was well deserved on some level, but my dad adamantly told me to never try anything like what he did, and I can't say I blame him. All aboard the Karma bus, and Ted, we saved you a seat right up front. You know, those easy access ones that you're going to be using for the rest of your life? Yeah, there. Honestly, I keep on going back and forth between holy crap, this was an amazing story, and holy crap, they went way too far. One thing's for certain though, this would make a pretty awesome movie. Now, in the comment section down below, who do you think the main actor should be? Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from, yeah, not trusting you. Mess with my father's girlfriend, your house and your world will crumble. Let's jump right in. This is a throwaway account. My father has passed and the troglodyte he got revenge on might have not been literate, but who needs drama? My father was old school, as in he barely went to it, as in he grew up in the poor side of Brooklyn, mainly Coney Island in the 50s. The poor side of Coney Island was literally the beach. His father owned a beach boat he converted into a house. He was basically one of the kids who ripped off tourists and got regularly beaten up by the cops, just to send a message to any of the other young thugs who plagued the neighborhood. The cops took his brother into the back room and beat on him so long that they got tired. My uncle cursed him, his family, and threatened his kids' gonads if the cop dared untie him. So another cop got involved and got tired. So they bought the family dinner instead of arresting him. Yeah, the whole family was like that. After joining the Navy and straightening up his life, he worked in the worst parts of New York City. First as an armed security guard, he had a story when he was conscripted into a pew-pew fight with gangsters by the NYPD. They wanted more projectiles in the air, and the cops pointed their pew-pews at my dad and his partner, telling them to pitch in. My dad said he looked the cop in his eye and emptied the pew-pew into the ceiling and said, "All out of projectiles, bye." He then had a few other words about the NYPD, and finally opened his own alarm company. This was in the days when an alarm system was a battery, a long copper wire,